Hello, I'm Dr. Joel Domingo, and in this video, I'm going to cover the purpose statement and the research questions, aligning with the research problem statement. Now, in an earlier video, I introduced you to this big A word, alignment, and gave the analogy of a plane veering off course just maybe a degree or two, but over time, by the end of the journey, that is completely off base. It's the same thing with a ship. It's the same thing with just a few degrees off at the start and doesn't look right, but then over time, well, that's all alignment. And what I want to do in this video is talk specifically about how to link those ideas together, specifically the connection between the problems and the purposes, and how research methodology and design fits into this idea of alignment. So we're going to dig into alignment and look at the problem and purpose, the methodology, and the design. When I went over the video in the 15 components of the prospectus tool, I talked specifically about there were going to be certain parts in that prospectus tool that are going to be critical for alignment, and here we are. So, just a quick review first of all. One video I talked about the basic and applied dissertation difference, that basic dissertations focus on generating new knowledge and applied dissertations focus on applying new knowledge and also pursue a solution to the problem in the field. You want to think of these two as a spectrum as opposed to it's either one or the other. And in the problem statement or the research problem, you want to phrase this in the form of a statement. The research problem represents a clear problem in the field as evidenced by the literature. That it's written succinctly, it's not too large in scope. In other words, the problem is that we need to end world hunger. Well, that's great, but that's too large of a thing to tackle. Another way that someone has put thinking about researching things that are too big is this phrase: do not boil the ocean. Okay, your research problem or a problem statement, it's not too small in scope. So the problem is looking at specific 5 English-speaking left-handed employees at the JLD company and their effectiveness. Well, that's too small in scope. That could be a problem for sure, but it's not a research problem. And the problem should be unique, meaningful, and dissertation worthy. By dissertation worthy, I mean it adds to the literature. It contributes to the field. Now, we start your dissertations by looking at the topic. And everybody has an idea of what they want to study in their dissertation. And so what we encourage students to do is to narrow the topic down. One of the first steps in looking at a dissertation is getting a handle on things. Again, you can't boil the ocean or you can't save the world, so to speak. So you want to narrow down your topic. Here's an example using what's known as the research topic triangle. What the triangle is just a visual way to look at issue at hand, but then narrow it to something that you want to research. Here we go. Let's look at the idea of pollution. Yeah, that's great that you want to study pollution, but pollution is too broad. So let's narrow it down to what type of pollution. Well, there's land, sea, whatever. Well, air pollution. Okay, that's a little bit better, but air pollution is still too broad. Let's narrow it down even further about the causes of air pollution. So you see, as you are narrowing down the topic, you are still within the big topic, but narrowing it down to where it's doable. And finally, the effects of aerosol products on air pollution. That is a subset of the causes, a subset of air pollution, and a subset of the big idea of pollution. That's narrowing down the topic, and that's one of the first things you want to do when you start your dissertation. Now, how do you link that topic with a research question? Well, that's the nuance and that's the work that you have to do in your prospectus tool. But let me give you this an example here. The topic is the impact of remote technologies on education. Okay, that's been narrowed down to just let's look at education. Well, the issue is the impact of remote technologies on education. What's the problem? The lack of students in distance classes. Okay, yes. Again, and remember that the research problem or the problem statement is based on the literature. Let's look at the purpose statement. To study why students do not attend distance education classes at a community college. Yes, that you see how it flows from the research problem. And finally, the research question: does the use of website technology in the classroom deter students from enrolling in a distance education class? All along the way, you see that these ideas are linked. In other words, they are aligned. Now, if I ask something different about distance learning, let's say in the purpose statement, instead of studying why students don't attend distance learning classes, and instead I say the purpose is to study why faculty don't have enough classes to teach, well, that has nothing to do with the lack of students in distance classes. So we're going to look at alignment again. Remember, the key to aligning the problems with your purposes is that, remember, the purpose of your research, to study, to do something, to investigate, to understand, etc., it's built upon the problem. So here's a way to think about it. If you say the problem is X, then the purpose of your study, or the purpose of this study, is to do something, to investigate, understand, etc. That's a verb, in order to address the problem so that this organization, etc. will benefit. Conceptually, if you could think of the problem and purpose linked like that, then you will be light years ahead. Okay, remember, the problem is X, so the purpose of the study is what's the verb that you're going to do to address X. All right, here's some tips on the purpose statement. Think about why you want to do the study. The purpose is to what? If your purpose is to identify, to explore, to understand, typically using those words are a trigger for qualitative studies. What if your purpose of the study is to identify relationships, or to predict, or to establish cause and effect? Those are more quantitative or correlational studies or experimental studies. Maybe the purpose is to assess an impact of something. That's an evaluation study. So again, the type of verb that you use in your purpose will trigger what type of methodology and design you're going to use. And that is the essence of what alignment is about. Another idea of the purpose statement is how will you address the research problem through the research questions. So if the problem is the foundation of the purpose, the research question is begotten from the purpose statement. In other words, it goes in this order. Problems link to purposes, which links to research questions. Now, here's a key tip. In qualitative studies, the research questions are not the same as your interview questions. The research questions will help guide the data. And again, we'll cover all this in the residency sessions, but research questions are not the same as interview questions. The most common problem with research questions is that they are not aligned with the problem statement. So, when you write them, you want to be clear, objective, and to the point. How will it be answered? If it's a quantitative study, you'll use hypotheses and variables. If it's a qualitative study, maybe you'll be looking at the qualities of a case, the relationships, etc. If you're using mixed methods, you'll look at both together. Let me give you some examples. Why did the students cross the road? Well, that's okay. It's a good research question, but that's too broad. Here's a way of asking that question, but with a little more specificity. How many students crossed the road at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time on July 21st, 2019? That seems too specific. Now, that's better than being too broad, but okay, that's just a simple question, and it doesn't really, reveal anything. So here's a better question. What were some of the political, social, and environmental factors that occurred in Seattle in July 2019 that contributed to the CityU residency students crossing Denny Way? Even better, a little more specific, more focused, give some clarity, etc. That's a good research question. Now, again, your research questions are going to be a lot more complex than that, but the point is that you don't want to be too broad, you don't want to be too specific, you want to be just right. And your dissertation chair will be helping you in that process, especially at the beginning. All right. One final example of a problem, a purpose, and research questions. I want you to take a look at the specific words that are used and how they align, how each of these statements align with each other. The problem is that doctoral dissertation students exhibit a range of emotions when working on their research, thereby creating unpredictability in their relationships with those closest to them. That's the problem. Okay, let's assume that it was research per the literature, etc. And so the purpose of this qualitative phenomenological study is to understand the lived experience of doctoral students who have completed their dissertations within an 18-month time span. Therefore, the research question, how do doctoral students understand the idea of external supports from people? Notice that the problem is linked to the purpose, which is linked to the research question. If at any point any one of these statements use something different or don't really relate to the previous statement, that's misalignment. And again, the point of the dissertation, especially at the beginning, is alignment. All right. A summary. Problem statements, make sure they're clear, concise, limited in scope. Don't try to solve the problem for the whole world. The purpose statement. Why are you investigating this problem? What's the intervention you propose to address? And the research questions. What questions do you intend to ask and answer with your research? Once again, it is all about alignment. All right. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to being with you on this journey.